This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
So why do seagulls live near the sea? Because if they lived near the bay, they'd be bagels. Welcome to Wings and Things, where you'll find real answers to real questions about everything you want to know about pet birds. Care, feeding, bird products, travel, and more. Everything to make your frequent flyer a happy camper. From parrots to parakeets, cockatiels to cockatoos, you'll have a bird's eye view of everything there is to know about your fun, feathered friends. So, spread your wings and get ready to fly on Wings and Things.
Welcome to Wings and Things on Pet Life Radio. I'm your host, Robin Shawokas, and today I'm visiting at Hill Country Aviaries in Austin, Texas. This week we're going to talk about the art of designing a great aviary with Mark Moore. Mark is the co-owner and curator of birds at Hill Country Aviaries. Mark's very active with the American Federation of Aviculture. In fact, he chairs the AFA Publications Committee and is instrumental in the creation of their wonderful magazine, The Watchbird. If you're not a member, you should check it out, and The Watchbird is well worth the membership. One of Mark's specialties is aviary design. Today, Mark's going to share some of his techniques for building quality housing for our parrots. We'll be right back after these messages.
Sitting on a branch overlooking the parking lot, the pigeons watched as a Mercedes pulled in below them. What do you think? One bird said to the other. Should we put a deposit on that car? Stay perched. Wings and Things will be soaring back right after these messages.
What if you could protect the life of your cat with something so simple and affordable that you already use every day? Get ready for the evolution of kitty litter. It's Pretty Litter. Along with all the features you've come to expect from your kitty litter, Pretty Litter's patented and scientific formula will also monitor your cat's health and detect illnesses early while providing industry-leading odor control. 2 kitty litters, same cat, same price. But there's one important difference. Pretty Litter reacts to your cat's waste by detecting health issues simply by changing color. And the key is that Pretty Litter detects these issues before your cat shows symptoms of physical illness or pain, likely saving you major dollars in vet bills while protecting the health of your cat. What do you think, little guy? Ready to switch litter? Pretty Litter. Colorful insight into your cat's health.
Go to prettylittercats.com/cat101 or use coupon code CAT101 to get 20% off your first subscription order.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
A Frenchman walks into a bar with a parrot on his shoulder. The bartender asks, "Where did you get that thing?" The parrot replies, "In France. There are millions of them." Don't have a canary. Wings and Things is back.
Welcome back to Wings and Things on Pet Life Radio. As I mentioned before, our guest today is Mark Moore. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Fine. How are you?
Good. It's great to have you here. Well, actually, for me to be here. So, Mark, how did you get started in aviculture?
Actually, we inherited a parrot when I was a small child from my grandparents. And having a bird in the household as a young child was a great influence on me.
Mm-hmm. And now, did you get to interact with that bird? And
not very much. He was a wild imported Amazon, but the fact that he was able to mimic my mother's voice, I found very intriguing.
Did he tell you to behave?
He yelled at my brother a lot.
That's good. Very good. And it brings back that thought that they do mimic really well, and people forget that sometimes. So you have to be careful what you say in front of your pet birds. So is that your first bird-related memory, or?
Yeah, the first memory of having a bird in the house would be that Amazon. Yeah, his name was Jekyll.
Cool. Dr. Jekyll.
He had many personalities. He did, yes.
Now, how about wild bird memory? Or do you do a lot of birding, or?
I did. Growing up on a farm, my parents had 80 acres. My grandparents had 250 acres.
Oh, my.
So we were always outside with the wildlife, whether it be the pheasants or anything else that was indigenous to the area.
Okay. So that's how you got your start. How did you get involved in aviculture itself?
I had moved to California in 1979, and every day on the way home from school would stop at a pet store. And Blanche Way was the owner, and she knew that I had a keen interest in the birds that were in her shop, and she was generous enough to allow me to make payments once a week.
Nice.
And I acquired my first cockatoo, which was the first bird that I owned.
A cockatoo. That's not necessarily a starter bird, if you will.
I've never started small.
Just go for it. That's the way to do it. So now how long did you have that bird?
I had him for about 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that again is another important point that for listeners to think about when they're considering getting a bird or getting another bird for their collection, that they do live a long time.
They do.
And you have to be dedicated to that and aware of what you're getting into. So, Mark, are you involved, or are there any conservation projects with birds that you're particularly interested in?
There's a lot of great projects out there with very dedicated people working on them. I like the Kakapo project in New Zealand.
Oh, that's great.
I've actually been to New Zealand several times, and I've been to Kapiti Island, which is just north of Maud Island. An experience I will never forget.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The Kakapo's been on the internet quite a bit with the video.
Yes, there is a new video, isn't there?
There is. So that's been pretty popular lately.
Yeah.
So they've brought them to the forefront, which is good. They're a huge parrot.
Very big parrot.
Yeah.
But not needing to fly, they can be a little heavier than most.
Right. It's interesting, some of the species that you do find in that part of the world that we don't get a lot of exposure to. And now that project, what is their mission? So for our listeners who aren't familiar with what's
they had
going
a
on.
very, very small population. It's one of the most endangered birds in the world. And they're just trying to propagate the pairs that they have, manage them genetically, and be able to increase the population slowly. It's a difficult process, but they've had some success.
Excellent. It's so important that we support organizations or groups that are doing that kind of conservation work. Is there a way that our listeners can be involved in supporting that, or
Yeah, I'm sure if you check out the internet, there's a way to make contributions to that program.
Okay.
I know it's very time consuming. They've been working at it a long, long time, and the expenses in doing it are astronomical.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's something that we forget sometimes, that the conservation work that's going on, all of it is so very important, but it does take money. It takes that support of people who have a passion for birds and who have a passion for the environment. And if we can get out there as pet bird owners and support the conservation efforts, I think it's really a good way to go about things. So
Absolutely.
Now, what we're going to talk about today, Mark, you're really into aviary design. To put it lightly, maybe.
Yeah, I've built a few.
Yeah. Seeing your facility here, it's a little different than what a companion parrot owner might have. But what do you think are the essentials of good aviary design?
Make the enclosure as large as possible, although bigger is not always better. And again, the security of the bird in the enclosure itself.
Okay.
No hazards, made out of the right material, positioned properly, and if it's indoor or outdoor, there's different things to consider. So.
Okay. If the average parrot owner who's got one bird really and is in a place where they feel they could use an outdoor aviary, what kind of materials would you suggest them using as far as, wire, mesh, things like that are concerned?
Depending upon the type of bird that you're housing, GAW wire is recommended for outside use,
Okay.
Which is galvanized after weld. So therefore, the welding application is also covered with the galvanizing process to prevent rust.
Oh, okay.
Your cage will last much longer. New welded wire, galvanized wire, has to be washed to make sure you don't get the toxicity off of the zinc,
Right.
Which is easily done with vinegar.
Okay.
But leave it outside, let it weather. Don't just buy wire and build a cage and put the bird in it without actually treating the wire itself.
Okay. And that's good, a one-time wash with the
Yes.
vinegar. Okay. Because I know that's a huge concern in the companion parrot world and in the aviculture world as well. The toxicity, the zinc toxicity, it comes up all the time.
Correct.
When I'm speaking to people. Yeah. And so the one-shot wash with vinegar.
Yeah, I usually buy the wire in advance. I leave it out in the rain, the sun, and then I soak it in a bath of vinegar water. And then again, leave it out in the rain and hose it off and let it air dry.
Okay. And for the floor of the aviary, is concrete the way to go?
Concrete works in some applications. Depends upon the location of the aviary. You need drainage.
Okay.
Concrete will keep your predators from coming in under the bottom of the cage. It's easier to clean and sweep and hose. But that's also a complicated process because you have to clean, sweep, and hose.
Right.
Dirt grounds allow decomposition much better. But then again, you can have the parasitic problems. So it depends upon your bird. If you have a bird that's on the ground a lot, I recommend concrete.
Okay.
Or a suspended aviary. That works just as well.
Okay. For somebody who wants to put an aviary out in their backyard, cost-wise, is it worth it to make, a big flight? Or is it enough for them to be outside?
If they're outside, exercise is part of the experience for them. So again, as big as possible, within reason.
Okay.
A 20-foot flight for a macaw is great if you have the space to do it. It doesn't have to be that big, but you don't want your bird outside exposed to elements. You need cover, shelter from rain, sun. It's the size is almost depending upon the space you're going to put it.
Okay.
But make it big enough for the bird to have enough exercise and space to fly.
Can it be too big?
It can, because if you ever have to catch the bird in an emergency, you need to be able to have access to it. I have some friends who have built what I call tiger pens. The birds love them. There's lots of space, but when you need to go to retrieve them, to bring them inside, or to treat them for a veterinary issue, it can be difficult to capture them.
Okay. And if Barb were here, she'd remind us that maybe we could do some training and get them.
That would be helpful. Yeah. You just don't want to take the
recall.
bird and throw it outside, because you need to be able to
Right.
to work with him.
There definitely needs to be something built in as far as a retrieve is concerned, which, safety concerns, Mark. If you've got that bird, and now you've put it outside, what's the best way to ensure that it's not going to be an escape situation?
An airlock system is important if you have a large aviary, especially with an active species.
Okay.
A more sedentary species may not be the one to fly over your shoulder as you open the door, but
Right.
That's always a concern.
Can you explain that term for our listeners?
For an airlock?
Yeah.
An airlock is an entrance into an aviary that has two doors. You can walk into an enclosed area, close the door behind you, and then walk into the secondary door, which lets you into the aviary itself.
And I think that's so important, because we've got now you're talking about more than likely a flighted bird that you've got in this aviary, and they are capable of just going right over your shoulder, going over your head, and out the door.
Correct.
And then you need to be concerned with getting them back and getting them back in the aviary. And I think if it's a situation where there's a distance from your house to the aviary, you need to be really careful when you're taking the birds out that they're secured from point A to point B, so you're not going to need to get your bird back to video.
Correct.
But I think that's really important, and it brings up some training issues in my mind that you'd want to perhaps train a recall if you're going to bring a bird out to an aviary, so that it is in place in case even if your setup doesn't meet all, it doesn't fulfill your needs, the bird does get out, then how do you get it back? So I think some training is important, if you're going to do this kind of setup. So how about perching in an aviary?
I always have at least two perches, one at each end, and high enough that the bird is just above my head level.
Okay.
So they have a sense of security. And it's, again, the size of the aviary depends on how many perches you're going to put in. Okay. A landing at the bottom is good as well, but you tend to trip over those because they're in your way. So place the perches for the bird's convenience, but also for your own. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a wood that you would suggest? I mean, we use all different kinds, but is there a certain wood that you think makes good perching?
A lot of people use manzanita. For a large flight, it can be difficult to get lengths that are long enough.
Right.
There are some complications with manzanita. It's extremely smooth, so you have to take the grinder over it, rough up the outside, make sure there aren't any big cracks in it, because toenails can get caught in the cracks.
That's a really good point.
Depending upon the climate that you're in, a wire perch is actually very practical. But if it's going to be in a cold weather climate, you need to take it out during the freezing months.
Okay. Yeah, the manzanita, I remember if you went into an avian specialty store, that's what you saw.
Yep.
That was what all the perching was made of. And it lasts. It definitely, it's for if you've got a big chewer or something like that, the manzanita will last a little bit longer than some of the softer woods. But you're right, you absolutely do have to grind them down. Otherwise, it's just kind of, slip and slide.
Yes.
And that's not something you want to set up. As far as dimensions of perches, talk about this a lot when I speak to companion parrot owners. Is there, a macaw size? Is there a kike size, perching?
There are many options available. The thing to remember is don't use dowel rods, because then the perch is the same diameter for its entire length. A bird with large feet will perch on a small branch, but he shouldn't have only a small branch to perch on.
Right.
So allow different sizes, different textures if you can. Natural tree branches are perfect, but again, they chew them up and you have to replace them.
Sure.
People use 2x4s. that's a good perching material, you replace those quite often also.
Right.
So, yeah, the size of the perch is important for the bird's anatomy, but a variation of sizes is what's also important.
Right. That's usually the bottom line is when I'm talking to people is that you need to be aware that out in the wild, the tree branches are not uniform. It's not 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches for this kind of bird, and they don't fly around until they find just the perfect branch that's the right diameter all the time. And so, giving them that option, and they're going to move around. If they're not comfortable where they are, they're going to move anyway. So that's just something to keep in mind, so that when you go to the store, if you're buying perches, if you're not cutting your own, you just need to be aware that it doesn't always have to be the macaw size or the cockatoo size or whatever, cockatiel size for that matter. Are there any woods that you don't use?
Some of the fruit woods we avoid, apple and cherry in particular. There can be some cyanide traces that are under the bark. There's not a whole lot of that in Texas growing wild anyway.
Right.
So we use cedar, which some people say because the oils is not good, but the cedar branch is fine. I mean, they're going to chew it up. You're going to replace it. Oak is naturally a very good one.
Yeah.
Any other hardwoods that are in this area are fine.
It's interesting. Oak comes up a lot on the toxic wood list, and I think it kind of ended up there inadvertently. It doesn't really belong there. The acorn is the toxic material there. That's what you want to avoid. But as far as the wood's concerned, a lot of the toys that we make have oak parts, and
it's like rhubarb. You eat the stalk, don't eat the leaf.
Right. Right.
So there.
And I think it's important too, since we're talking about toxic things, that when people look at those toxic lists online, you could make yourself absolutely crazy, going, oh, well, this is on this list, but it's not on that list. I found it on one, but, I found it on two, but not three. And it can get, you can get crazy.
Yeah.
But I have found UC Davis has a really great toxic plant and wood list on their website. Otherwise, just cross-reference, do what you're comfortable with. And if you get to that point where, it's just something you're really not sure about, talk to a veterinarian, see what your vet says. So we're going to take a break here, Mark, and we can talk some more about aviary design when we come back, but we'll be right back after these messages.
Stay perched. Wings and Things will be soaring back right after these messages.
Put on a perfectly possum pet party. Having an awesome birthday or adoption day celebration for your four-legged friend? Or just want a fun excuse to throw a fun party with your friends from the dog park? Deck out your party with Molly and Bandit Pet Party accessories. Party products designed specifically for pets. There are wearables, including adjustable pet party hats, bow ties, and tutus. The photo prop kits include funny glasses and hats. The party supplies and decorations include coordinating table covers, party banners, cake decorations, and treat bowls, cups, and bags. Everything you need to create great memories and Instagram-worthy photos. They're available in 2 colorful themes, tropical and fireman. It's a dog's life. Celebrate it with Molly and Bandit Pet Party at mollyandbanditpetparty.com/petlife.
Let's talk pets
Let's talk pets
on Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
A Frenchman walks into a bar with a parrot on his shoulder. The bartender asks, "Where did you get that thing?" The parrot replies, "In France. There are millions of them." Don't have a canary. Wings and Things is back.
Welcome back to Wings and Things on Pet Life Radio. I'm your host, Robin Shawokis, and I'm here today with Mark Moore from Hill Country Aviaries in Austin, Texas, and we've been discussing aviary design. Mark, what else needs to be in the aviary? If you've got this great outdoor aviary that you've built, what needs to be in there? We've talked about perching.
I like an exterior feeding station, so that if you don't have to walk into the aviaries, to feed your birds, it's a little more convenient for you. It also allows people who may need to bird sit for you to come and interact, with your birds and feed them and take care of them without actually walking in.
Oh, that's a good point.
So a sheltered outside feeding station, I think, is very important.
Okay. And you mentioned before having shelter. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm not going to put anything out there. I want them to get sun. And, if it's a bird that you're bringing back into your house, you can bring them in if the weather gets bad. Is a shelter essential in any outdoor aviary?
Yeah, all animals need to be sheltered,
Yeah.
whether it's from the sun, from the rain, from the wind, or even just a visual barrier from something that might be next to them. So, yeah, absolutely. Shelter is imperative on all outside cages.
Okay.
So.
And in building that shelter, just, wood barriers, what kind of shelter are we talking about?
Yeah, you can use a wood material. I like to use roofing material. It lasts longer for me.
Okay.
Metal will radiate heat, so you need to make sure that it's, far enough off the cage that it's not going to make a hot environment. But yeah, it can be, plastic is good too. A little more waterproof. The wood ones you tend to replace, they rot, fall down.
Okay.
But yeah, metal or plastic works just as fine.
Okay. And in the shelters, would you put a bottom in them, or would you just do a, corner shelter maybe and put a perch there?
As far as a bottom, you mean...
Would there be a floor to the shelter? Or where they would be standing on like a flat piece versus a perch?
No, I would just put a roof and a side
Okay.
with a perch underneath.
Okay.
It's easier to clean and maintain. The birds can also chew them a little bit, so you want to be able to replace them easily.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. And so we've got the shelter, we've got, made sure that the wire that we're using is right. We've got perching, a feeding station. Is there anything else that you think is really important in an outdoor aviary?
If you can put in some type of enrichment for them, things to chew on or play with. I used to have some major metro cockatoos. They actually like to use the bell off of a toy, and they would scoop up a plastic ball that was on the floor, pick it up and roll it down their back, and that was their game all day long. So things for them to interact with. It's fun for us to watch. They have things to do.
Right.
But yeah, give them something to play with, or just they're not in a sedentary environment that's just a cage and two perches. So,
right.
Sure.
And I think, along those lines as well, don't overcrowd them in this aviary. I mean, this is their chance to be outside, kind of spread their wings, pardon the pun. But, I've seen aviaries before that have so much stuff in them that the birds can't maneuver, couldn't do a flight from, point A to point B if they really wanted to. and it's everything in moderation. I'm obviously all about enrichment, and that's my thing. But you can offer different kinds of enrichment outside than you can inside. And it gives you a chance to try some new things. We do a lot of water stuff outside. There's I have a presentation on how to do a self-directed shower, which it's important that you have a timer on that one though, because we love our birds, but sometimes they just abuse things, and you could have just this nice flood going on if they keep using it over and over again. But things that they can interact with, and giving them choices, I think, too, out in that aviary. And if they can go to that shelter and get out of the way, or like you said, a visual barrier, all those things are important. And when you're designing your aviary, I think it's important to think of, if you've got the space, to think about where it's going to go. What are they going to be looking at? What are they going to be exposed to? If you've got it, we were working with World Bird Sanctuary in St. Louis, and their weathering yard for their birds of prey is right up against a hillside. And on the hillside, there are constantly squirrels and deer and things going by, which is great enrichment for the birds of prey, but you need to think about that. What are your birds going to be exposed to when they're out there? And some of it may be a little stress-provoking, but that's okay.
Or just like building a house. Do you want your front porch to face north if you live in Canada, or do you want your front porch to face south if you live in Florida? I mean, you have to design it based on its location and where the sun sets and where the sun rises, and your general access. So,
right.
Yeah.
Are there any particularly good suppliers that are national suppliers that you can think of that might be useful to the listeners as far as if they want to undertake this project? Yeah,
we used to use Valentine's Supply a lot, but they've been bought out by a group now in Florida, I believe, called Parrot Stuff.
Okay.
And they've been very good at shipping things that you need. Morton Jones is also a good supplier for your everyday building supplies. But some of your farm and fence material suppliers are just as good. And I like Home Depot, and I like Tractor Supply. So
yeah, and sometimes it's easier that way, and it's more accessible to people. Yeah. When we were talking about suppliers, it made me think, what do you think about like soft mesh that's not necessarily a hard wire? I know some people, Laura Joseph, who teaches training and behavior modification, she has enclosed her backyard with like a softer mesh that just goes over the whole top of her backyard. Have you ever used anything like that?
More like a poultry netting? Or...
Right.
I do have some poultry netting, which I use for non-hook bills.
Okay.
your parrot's going to chew through that eventually.
Right.
And then you're on a 20-foot ladder with needle and thread sewing it back together. It works great for keeping wild birds out of your yard.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to work for a long time keeping parrots in your yard. But it works great for, your quail, your pheasants, your peacocks. Things are less likely to chew it up.
Right. Is there anything, when you mention, keeping wild birds out, are there any safeguards you can take to avoid predation of your birds while they're out in that aviary?
You need to have some sort of barrier around the bottom. Snakes are a problem, raccoons, possums. Of course, there's the rodent issue. If your wire is too big, you want to have things just coming and going, so your feed bill is going to be increased. But then there's also the disease transmission process also. So,
right.
Yeah. You can't keep everything out, but it helps if you design it to keep some out. Yeah.
Okay. If you're not using a concrete floor, if you're using a ground floor, dirt or whatever, how far down in do you need to sink your wire?
I like to go down at least a foot.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of skunks in this area, and those guys like to dig. So if you can put in a little bit of a concrete footer and some wire that goes down about a foot, that'll keep out almost all your predators.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that is an issue that a lot of people face, and it deters a lot of people from doing it. If you've got an aviary that you're going to be, out there most of the time when your birds are out there, that it's fine. But if you've got birds that you're going to be leaving out for any extended period of time, then you definitely need to be aware of those kind of things. Now, Mark, to get away from aviary design just for a minute, you're very involved with AFA, the American Federation of Aviculture.
Yes.
I think it's a great organization, and I think that pet bird owners need to be involved as well. It's traditionally been an organization of breeders, is that correct?
That's how it started, yeah.
And what would you work on the Watchbird.
I do.
What would you tell people about the What would you like them to know about the Watchbird?
The Watchbird is the journal from the American Federation of Agriculture, and it has articles from all over the world, whether it's a conservation article or some of the more famous parks that are either in Spain or Germany or even in the United States, what their breeding successes have been, what they're building, what they're interacting with the public, and also stories about individuals and their pet birds. So it's a well-rounded magazine with lots of information. It is, and
it's a beautiful magazine. It's really a visually stimulating publication. Now, how do you get your articles for the Watchbird?
We solicit some articles from people that we know that are actually in the industry or out in the field. There's a group on the board of directors who helps gather up some of the information for us. Okay. And then there's people who just enjoy the magazine and want to contribute. So we encourage that. So
that's something for the listeners to think about, that if you want to join AFA and you become a member and you have a particularly interesting story about some success that you've had or an experience that you've had at a particular facility, something like that, you could send in an article. And how would they do that, Mark?
Just use my email address is the easiest, which is afawatchbird@earthlink.net.
Okay.
And then we'll send the document to the review committee and we'll contact you.
Great. That sounds good. So to get involved with AFA, what do people need to do? I mean, membership is always, the organizations I belong to, we're always talking about membership. And is it a big process for somebody to become a member of AFA?
It's a few clicks on the internet. It's very simple. It's a $40 a year membership. Most of that covers your magazine, and others, goes to the projects that we support, and to keep the organization fighting for your rights to keep birds.
Okay, which is in this day and age, I think that's a very big issue that a lot of people aren't aware of. That there are, questions coming up out there in the legislature that are suggesting that ownership of any kind of exotic is not going to be possible. And that's something that AFA works very diligently on. Am I correct?
Yes, they do. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your membership gets you your subscription to the Watchbird?
Yeah, the Watchbird magazine comes out quarterly. It also gives you advantage to post classifieds or go to the internet. Clubs can join, and there's information in the internet that they can put in their newsletters. We have a convention once a year, which travels back and forth through the southern states. You get a discount on your convention registration. But there's lots of benefits to becoming a member.
Okay, good. So you should check that out. And again, the website for AFA is what?
The afabirds.org.
Okay, afabirds.org. That's something you want to check out. And like I said, it's well worthwhile. And I think people sometimes think of AFA as an organization just for people who are breeding birds, but that's not necessarily the case. And I think there's a lot of really great information. And even if it is slanted, if the information does have a breeding slant, there's still information that as a pet bird owner that people can take away from that. I mean, the aviary design piece here today that we've talked about, a lot of that is from your breeding experience.
Yes, it is.
And it's still very relevant to people who are trying to build aviaries at their homes. So is there anything else, Mark, that we want to convey to the listeners? Or
Just, if you're designing an aviary, be practical about it. Use durable materials that are safe. And like I said, make it as big as you can within reason. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. And I just have a couple of upcoming events. May 16th, Florida West Coast Avian Society is having its annual Bird Mart, and I'll be speaking there. And July 17th and 18th, I'll be doing the enrichment side of a raptor handling class in New Mexico. That's part, you can check that out at avianambassadors.com. And some of the websites that we'd like you to visit are goodbirdinc.blogspot.com, goodbirdinc.com, theleatherelves.com, avianenrichment.com, and hillcountryaviaries.com. And then, as we mentioned, afabirds.org. So for the enrichment tip of the week, the aviary, it's all about providing enough but not too much stimulation, I think. You've got this bird, it's outside, it's getting all that external stimulation, and what you're providing as far as enrichment is concerned kind of needs to go along with that. Maybe the perching gets moved so they can see different things from that vantage point. Try to keep your enrichment that you're providing out in an aviary as natural as possible, just so that it kind of is a nice flow, a nice transition from what your bird's getting in its cage, in its home. We're out of time. I look forward to talking to you some more, Mark, and we'll be back checking out Hill Country Aviaries. And as usual, if you'd like to contact us, if you have questions or suggestions, it's robin@petliferadio.com or barbara@petliferadio.com. So thanks for joining us, Mark, and we will be talking to you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Join us every week on Wings and Things and get a bird's eye view of everything there is to know about pet birds and how to make your frequent flyer a happy camper. Wings and Things, only on PetLifeRadio.com.